glad you've joined us today for another interview in our long-running podcast series, Let's Talk, produced by Hazel and Betty Ford. I'm your host, William C. Moyers. Today in the studio with me, Maggie Moe and Joshua Vranas. Not only have Maggie and Josh turned their up-close and personal struggles with substances into the opportunity to recover, but from it all, they've created a musical production on stage and in front of an audience. A musical that involves dragons. Josh, Maggie, dragons?
Yeah, dragons. It's just the perfect creature to embody addiction. And we were really passionate about sort of separating the lead character, Georgia, from her addiction, but still have it be very present in her life. And dragons are known to hoard and sort of take over a person's life, very similar to addiction.
How did the dragon get you, Maggie?
Oh, great question. Well, when I was about 15 years old, I had Lyme disease and I was sick. I had a lot of migraines, and so the doctors prescribed me opiates, and that just was the next 10 years of my life, chasing that dragon, chasing that first high. Alcohol got involved as well, and it wasn't till I was 25 and living back home with my parents that I got the opportunity to go to Betty Ford. Oh. And I've been sober now for 7 years, since 2016 in January.
Congratulations.
So thank you. I know, it's really exciting. I'm really proud of myself.
Yeah, you should be proud of yourself. And to be so young, is it hard to be young and to find recovery?
Yes and no. Because I think in a lot of ways it's hard because a lot of people meet at bars or there's the party scene and that's how people socialize, especially when they're younger. But I've found that I can drink a Diet Coke and still hang out with people and get to know people, and I'll remember all of it. So I think in that sense it's a lot better of a situation.
How did you two meet each other, Josh?
We met at NYU at the Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program.
New York University?
In 2019. And throughout that first year, you're sort of paired up randomly with composers and lyricists to write various songs throughout the year. And something just clicked. We instantly knew from seeing each other's work and then working together that it was destiny to work together.
And working together means being together, and yet when you were first together, you had a secret. You had a sense that you were not quite like Maggie. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I thought I was the exception, as we all do, and I didn't put the pieces together that addiction runs through my family. And it was really the COVID pandemic, when we were all separated and isolated, that it started to get pretty bad for me. But it was at the time that we had just started writing the show, and Maggie was so brave in sharing her story and her recovery process that I thought, I can do that for myself. And so it was really writing the show that got me sober.
So that's really interesting. And did you have a sense, Maggie, that your partner in this creative endeavor might be more like you than he thought he was? Or
I always had that sense about Josh, like probably from when we first met. I just saw a lot of similar tendencies and kind of the intensity and passion that he has, and I thought, like, I wonder if he takes this into other areas of his life, that kind of like relentlessness, where, you know, that chasing, I think that a lot of us want to do. And then, yeah, I definitely wondered if me sharing my story would impact how his relationship with alcohol was, and I'm just really glad that it did, because I don't know if we could have written the show if you hadn't had that realization. I wonder if you would have even wanted to, because it would have been such a barrier to actually telling the story if you weren't willing to be honest about it, I think.
Well, tell us more about the show and the story.
So it's sort of loosely based on Maggie's personal experience, and it follows the story of Georgia, an 18-year-old who is really bright, extremely intelligent in school and everything.
Just like me, no.
But she suffers from chronic migraines, and so she goes to a doctor, and the doctor prescribes her a dragon, which is a strange prescription, but she starts to take it, and all you have to do is look into its eyes, and it's mesmerizing and makes all the pain go away. But like pets and animals do, it continues to grow and take over her life until she tries to escape it.
Then what happens?
Well, you'll have to see the show. No, but basically, I guess we can spoil it a little bit here.
Yeah.
So she realizes that she wants to slay the dragon. She thinks she can just kill the dragon. But you can't ever, as we know in recovery, you can't just be like, oh, I'm done. We're like, that's dead to me. I'm done with it. I'm done with addiction. That's, that's not me anymore. It's always going to be a part of you, right? You have to, one day at a time, every single day, confront it. And so by the end of the show, the dragon gets small again because she's realized she hasn't been looking into its eyes, she hasn't been feeding it. And the dragon comes back and says, Georgia, and she says, not today. And so it's about that kind of daily reprieve that we know. And recovery, taking it one day at a time. The last song in the show is One Day at a Time.
And I want to talk about the fact that it is a musical, that it isn't a book, or at least not yet. It's not a play. It's not a drama, although there's probably drama in it. It's a musical. Why a musical?
Well, music brings people together,
Yes.
and it is a unifier in a way that if you can hit somebody emotionally in a place where they're unafraid, and you can show them the magic of it, which music is also magic, then there can be empathy.
Yes.
And we wanted to make sure that the entire time, even if you don't agree with what Georgia is doing, you at least understand it and you empathize with it. Because our main goal is to destigmatize addiction and recovery.
Yes.
And we've really found that the show can be, just as much as it is a mirror for those who have gone through Georgia's journey and understand it, it's also a window for a lot of people. And a window, hopefully, that shows empathy and where they can leave, hopefully with that stigma, a little lessened or hopefully completely eradicated.
And how does the music fit into the theme of the show? I mean, how does that work?
Well, basically, I think that what's really cool about having songs is that it takes you to that emotional place that you wouldn't just get from lines. I think there's something about pairing a melody with lyrics that can heighten the state of your experience, and it sits there and elevates you. It's something intangible that's just happening on the stage in front of you. And so I think that when you're experiencing those emotions and you're feeling the love that Georgia feels for the dragon at first, you're feeling the anger she feels when she wants to get rid of it but can't, you're feeling the kind of peace but knowing that she has to work on it in one day at a time, that's something intangible that you can add in the music that you can't just say in words. I think you have to feel, and so that adds to the empathy that the audience will feel, hopefully, for Georgia and her journey.
Now, when you say hopefully, in terms of the audience reaction, where does the play or the musical stand right now, Josh?
The reactions that we've had over the last year as we've been workshopping it and refining it have been overwhelmingly positive, and we're really grateful for that. We're happy that we're doing our part for that. And we had a lot of first responders come to our workshop in Hilton Head last year in August. And they were not musical people. They typically would never choose to go out to the theater. But their response was that it hooked them from the very start, and that what was it? That
they love that we never use the word addiction,
I
but
was
you
gonna
simply
ask,
implicitly knew that that's what it was about.
Yeah. And so why don't you implicitly use the term addiction?
I think because there's such a stigma around it, and I think there's so much negativity associated with it. A big reason why we wrote the show was because we felt like there weren't stories being told from addicts' perspective. There's so much, especially on stage, especially in musical theater. It's so much like, oh, there's this addict and they're bad and they ruin their families' lives, and oh, isn't it tragic? It's like, yeah, that is sadly a very common story, but we want to give people the opportunity to understand maybe why someone becomes an addict. And I think in using the magic of a dragon, this metaphor, it kind of softens the blow of the words like addiction, addict, heroin, opiates, all those things that people have such a negative association with.
Yeah.
And it kind of allows them to experience things through the lens of the magical realism in our show.
Yeah.
The show is titled My Pet Dragon, and so I would imagine if it's a pet dragon, we all have our ideas of what a dragon is, and a dragon from Harry Potter is a very different kind of dragon, perhaps, than one that you might see in a horror film or in a kid's book. So, is the dragon friendly, approachable, loving in the beginning, and then becomes a bad dragon? How does that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, starting it off with a baby dragon. That's
It's
adorable.
a baby dragon,
That's
which is cute.
Exactly,
Yes.
and that's going to reel you in.
Yeah.
But slowly, as monsters do, it continues to grow and it gets more terrifying, and you realize the true immense power behind it. And so that was kind of exciting to play with as we were writing it. Actually, was seeing how adorable it can be, how enticing it can be, and then how frightening it can be by the end. And then bringing it back to that place of still always asking, always,
Yes.
I'm hungry, Georgia, I'm so hungry, and her just, not today.
Leaving it in the cave, perhaps.
Yeah.
But not slaying it, to your point, because addiction is a chronic illness. We know there is, which means there's no cure for it yet. Of course, at Hazel and Betty Ford and other treatment programs, you learn how to, put it in the cave, but it's still there.
Yeah.
And so your dragon is still there.
Yeah.
Wow. And when you have been out on the road, the reaction from the first responders you talked about, what is the stages of bringing something like this to the big stage?
Well, so we have an opportunity in March 2024 to open the show in Atlanta, Georgia.
Fabulous.
Georgia, the main character.
Yeah.
So that was kind of serendipitous and cool. And that's going to be our first full-fledged production. So like costumes, sets, orchestrations, like what you'd see if you paid a ticket and went to a show. And so far we've done readings and workshops, and so it's been kind of pared down versions of that. So we have this awesome opportunity in March, and then hopefully from there we want to tour it and travel and start gaining more notoriety and buzz around the show, and eventually open in New York.
Of course.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a
And we're
big
talking,
dream.
and just to put that into context, we're talking about March of 2024. And we're sitting down here in the studio in the Twin Cities in May of 23. So we know that this podcast will have some life. So by the time March of next year comes around, it will be a full running musical on stage in Atlanta, Georgia. And I believe that you partnered with a treatment program down there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and it's not Hazel and Betty Ford, of course, but that's okay because, there's enough to go around. How did you make that connection with that treatment program?
Well, we had done a kind of recovery gala where we presented a few songs from the show at Acceptance Recovery in Athens, Georgia,
Yes.
and that's where we met
Fabulous.
Olivia, who's the person that's taking it to Atlanta.
Good. And is the audience just, quote unquote, people who've been touched by addiction, or is it truly for the general public? Josh?
It's for everybody, and it should be seen by everybody because, like I said about it being a mirror, it's a mirror for those who know Georgia's story, but it's also a window for those who maybe are still stuck in the stigma, who don't fully understand what it is to have an addiction and to start your recovery journey.
Yeah, wow. What is your expectation, Maggie, as it relates to how this is received? And I don't mean by the critics. We hope it's always going to be a good reception, but by the audience, because when we stand up and speak out as advocates, and that's what you all are doing personally and through your creative effort here, you tend to get a lot of replies or requests for help, pleas for help. Have you built that into how you're going to deal with the audience reaction?
Well, we'd certainly like to. I think we'd love to partner with you guys or somebody along the way that we can immediately have pamphlets, people there to talk to who can help if you realize, oh my gosh, that's me, I need to get into recovery right now. Like, we'd love to have people there that would be able to facilitate that. I think that's the dream for the show ultimately, to be able to do that.
And what about talking to other artists, playwrights, musicians about this? Is there a way that you network to get the word out, or how does that work?
Well, we have producers. We've worked with 35th Parallel Productions, and so they've done a lot of the marketing thus far. And yeah, I think word of mouth is always huge. Obviously, we have our NYU connections.
Yeah, so which is an important one because it
yeah.
has such a fine reputation.
Yeah,
Definitely.
so we're
Yeah.
really lucky to be able to have that for sure.
And of course, we'll have this podcast too
Yeah,
that we can use.
thank you.
I want to bring it back to, as we get ready to close here with just a couple minutes, to talk more about your personal journeys, because we know along that journey more is revealed, right? And now that you've written this play and composed the music for it, have you changed your perspective on addiction and recovery, or is the play or is the musical still relevant as you wrote it and produced it?
With my recovery journey being so closely tied to the show, I think it's really opened up my eyes to the broader community of recovery, because that was something I was not really involved in or knew anything really about. But through Maggie, my eyes have been opened to the vast and incredible community that is the recovery community. And I, sort of like what we said, if I hadn't have gotten sober, I don't think the show would be as impactful on my work on it,
Right.
because I wouldn't fully understand that journey to the same degree, because I was still going through it.
Yes.
I think if anything, I don't know, I mean, knock on wood, and we're never out of the woods with this thing. I think I've been really lucky that I've kept my sobriety date from when I went to Betty Ford. And I think one of the biggest things that was important to infuse into Georgia's story is that it's not always that cut and dry.
Right.
Like you can hear it a bunch of times and you can hit rock bottom, what you think is rock bottom, and it's not rock bottom. We have a song called Hitting Rock Bottom. So I think that that's been something that has given me more compassion for people that are still struggling and in and out of the rooms, because I feel like, yeah, every story is different, every addiction is different, every dragon looks different, and I think in the case of our show, it was important that we show somebody that's in the thick of it for a long time and seemingly loses everything many times, so that to not be glib or trite about it. And so I think that's definitely, I guess, opened my eyes to the greater community of recovering addicts, for sure.
Thanks for bringing your message of creative hope and help and healing to our audience today. I'm eager for the grand opening on Broadway in a year and a half or so, and then when you all are up there to get that Tony Award nominee, and we'll be there right with you. We want to get the first interview after you accept the Tony. Okay?
Oh, you got
Definitely.
it.
Okay.
It's yours, bud. Yeah.
Maggie Moe and Joshua Vranas, thank you so much for being with us today. My Pet Dragon is the musical, and we'll stay in touch with you all and follow you along to the great success as you do this one day at a time. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for all of you for joining us, tuning into this podcast. You can see that it's very inspiring to watch these Let's Talk podcasts, because they always end with an insight into what's possible through that process of dealing with your dragons. And that on the other side of the dragons is what we've seen here today. So we hope you'll tune in again for another edition of Let's Talk, and take good care.